My name is Aiden Green. My 89 number is 89535 through 894. This is my video for assignment 1 for evolution section 3 for the fall of 2024. So I'm going to start out with a brief summary of chapter 4 of Origin of Species, which is about natural selection. So Darwin begins this chapter with a brief description of the importance of natural selection, the methods of it, how it works, and the effects that it has overall. He then defines natural selection and explains it through the metaphor of a country undergoing change. He also explains how it is unnoticeable in the present, but can be seen through geological and fossil records. And then he speaks of how selection may modify the structure of the youth and subsequently cause change in the adult as well, which is a reference to von Bayer's law. Which states that embryos of different members of the same group are more alike than the adults, and the resemblances are greater the younger the embryos are examined. He then begins to talk about sexual selection and how it causes more offspring to be left by some individuals than others, and he uses birds. A great example is the peacock and its big and colorful feathers. He uses this to explain sexual selection. He next describes the action of natural selection by illustrating a wolf and his choice of prey. And then another point he uses is a more attractive plant undergoing more pollination. And an example is just you look at a flower and they have all sorts of different attractive colors and things that a bee would see and be like, okay, I want to pollinate this. He then describes the importance of cross-pollination as opposed to self-fertilization, how that promotes genetic diversity in subsequent generations. He then details circumstances needed for natural selection, such as intercrossing of organisms, geographical isolation and size, such as genetic drift, bottleneck effect, and founder effect. And he also says that natural selection is gradual, such that gradualism states. And then he then explains extinction by the process of new species replacing older ones, which kind of gets rid of the idea that evolution is linear, like we see in the common chimpanzee walking picture. That's this one. And then finally, he describes divergence of characters in varieties of species and genuses. He combines this with his concepts of extinction and divergence of character to explain how new species and genera are formed. He ends the chapter with a summary of everything that I've just said there. And since he published that in 1859, lots of progress has been made on the different facets of natural selection. One is Fay and Whitcomb in 2008 found that the segregable variation of gene expression is a key factor in assisting species in adapting to their environments. In observing the many causes of evolution, they found that adaptive evolution is primarily influenced by gene expression regulation. Species with higher rates of gene regulation tend to evolve more quickly because there is more diversity in potential final products, whether they are more or less beneficial. On the other end, species with lower regulation rates will evolve slower because their options are limited, and there are fewer points that a favorable mutation can occur and subsequently alter survival rate. To put it simply, there's less variables, so less things that can change to create something more beneficial. Fay and Whitcomb also observed the role of mutation rate in gene regulation evolution. They used pseudogenes as a control to serve as the baseline mutation rate for humans and chimpanzees, and their results found that mutational variance in genes positively correlated with divergence of gene expression. However, they discovered that cis-regulatory elements may play a vital role in gene expression's effects on evolution, but the cis-regulatory pathway is not understood very well and could potentially be a confounding variable. And here's a picture from their paper. It just states here's the model and then phenotype, genotype, phenotype, and then continuous and discrete variables, and so on and so forth. And this model was used to study gene expression. Next, so one thing is that Darwin observed natural selection in non-human populations that were more natural and undisturbed by humans. But recent progress by Millot in 2011 has revealed characteristics of evolution evident in the modern human population. Darwin might argue that it is impossible to observe evolution because of its gradual action, Milot argues that microevolution, which is the general evolution of a species, is present in the current human population. He studied the isolated island of Isle aux Coudres in Canada and found that selection favored women with earlier ages of first reproduction, AFR, which was also influenced by their fertility and fitness of offspring, as well as the lifespan's longevity of aforementioned offspring. This natural selection proceeded by the following processes. Women with younger AFR produced healthier and longer living offspring that then had AFR and thus repeated the process of their mothers and propagating more and more women with AFR. However, this change in AFR, which was observed using data between 1800 and 1940, could potentially be confounded and disputed by factors such as the increase in nutrition quality, increasing life expectancy, and overall global fertility increases. And here's a picture from this. You've got AFR showing increased fertility and so on and so forth, more longevity, and lifetime reproductive success overall increasing. And while knowledge of previous evolutionary events is apparent, recent research from No-Sil et al. 2018 shows that evolution to some probability follows a predictable pattern. No-Sil found that some traits are vastly more predictable than others. Using Timema stick bugs as a model organism, he studied the phenotypic fluctuations of color and pattern traits. He found that genetic drift is highly unpredictable and can greatly skew the results. Contrarily, the effects of natural selection and environmental change on the process of evolution, in not being completely random, are observable and predictable. His findings showed that less evolutionary factors contributing to a change in species traits meant more predictable outcomes. But the more evolutionary factors involved, the less accurate predictions were. His experiment included observations of the male stripe allele frequency fluctuations throughout generations compared to the rest of the Timema genome. The male stripe locus exhibited increased genetic fluctuation compared to other genes, and after mathematically quantifying evolution more frequencies of the gene, the results were compared to the theory, and it was found that male stripe gene was highly predictable due to presumptive behavior of predators preferring prey exhibiting rare or more noticeable phenotypes. And then we have recent research by Schlenke and Begun in 2003 also revealed insight on natural selection's role in immune system protein evolution in Drosophila. And here is a picture of Drosophila. I think I removed the tab. There, fruit flies. 34 genes controlling immunity were selected in Drosophila simulans, and while observing patterns in polymorphisms, researchers found that directional selection affects protein-coding genes of the immune system more than any other protein-coding gene. They also found that this results in their lower heterozygosity and lower diversity of the haplotype. The directional selection that causes these results derived from pathogens evolving alongside their hosts. Since pathogens exhibit a higher rate of mutation and shorter generation period than most species, the Drosophila species immune system has evolved to change at a faster rate to keep up with potential antigens. In contrast to the mammalian immune response, Drosophila immune systems are less specific to the antigen. Mammalian immune systems are more specific, which partially explains their lower microevolutionary rate. And so kind of how I like to think of this is that not only have the genes themselves evolved, but their rate of evolution going one, I guess to think of it mathematically, a derivative further, it's showing that their change is changing, the amount of change that's happening is changing, but then the rate of change of that change is changing. So it's almost like there's two layers to this evolution. And here we can see all the genes that were studied in Drosophila. It's quite a few. There are non-immunity X-linked genes, non-immunity autosomal genes, and all that. So then we have the evolution of hominids. The phylogeny containing humans and its recent ancestors has likewise been a topic of recent research by McVicker et al. 2009. While comparing the greatly unique human and chimpanzee genomes, these researchers found that natural selection played a much greater role in speciation between the two, as opposed to large ancestral populations, genetic drift, or differing rate of mutation. To make this comparison, they observed the effect of natural selection on the variation of neutral sequences by comparing and contrasting orthologous genes between 5 primate groups. They found that segments of DNA conserved between species showed a negative correlation with divergence. When comparing exonic and non-exonic conserved sequences, they found that changes in exonic sequences accounted for diversity of species far more than non-exonic or intronic sequences did. Finally, they also found that mutations / selection in short intronic sequences had a higher probability to influence divergence than other non-coding sequences due to having a greater chance of altering nearby conserved exonic DNA. And here I've got a picture. This is just of a phylogenetic tree of humans, chimp, gorilla, orangutan, just showing how they're related. And this was kind of the foundation for their research. Using this, they were able to set up their entire experiment. And then finally, Hein et al. In 2011 performed recent research in natural selection's effects on sexual selection via attractiveness of males to females. In their experiment, Drosophila serrata males were artificially selected to exhibit increased generational abundance of a sexually selective gene that made them more attractive to females. Once artificial selection was ceased, the sexually selective gene drastically decreased in the population. Their findings suggested that the sexually selected gene's frequency decreased over so few generations due to an evolutionary limit in the abilities of male sexual selection for attractiveness. Overall, this research shows that sexual selection, while it may be able to cause evolution, has nowhere near the evolutionary power that natural selection has. So, in short, natural selection has been shown through its data to be more influential in the altering of a genome species, or of a species genome over generations, than sexual selection. All right, that's my video. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.